賛成もあんまりないけど、でも、全く反対っていう人がゼロだから。
Welcome to the lazyfluency podcast, where we have casual conversations switching between English and Japanese so that you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey.
And I'm Miami.
And the topic of the day is the Emperor. Before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and or drop a review to the platform you're listening on. We appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, the Emperor. Japan has an emperor. You probably knew that. But why does the emperor exist? What does he do? And what do Japanese people think about him? Today, we'll talk about that. I learned a lot for this episode. I already thought I knew a decent amount. Or some amount, I guess. But I learned a lot more about the emperor and specifically the Meiji Restoration. First off, before we had this episode, before we prepared for this episode, I think something that was very interesting is that you didn't even know the current emperor's name. So, my first question to you would be, do you think most people in Japan know the emperor's name?
ちょっと正直どれぐらいの割合で、天皇陛下のお名前を知っているかっていうのはわかんないけど、ちょっと正直私も分かってなかったのはちょっとバズいなっていうね、のがあるんだけど、でも大体知ってるんじゃない？何らかしらのニュースとかでも出てるし、新聞とかね、出てるから、まあ大体は知ってると思うけど、でもその天皇にも家族がいるじゃん、天皇の息子とか、息子家族とかね。でもそこまで来ると多分みんな名前は言えないけど、さすがに今の天皇の名前は知ってる人は多いかなとは思う。
And did you, before we looked up this episode, knew what the emperor did or does or / could do?
私はあんまりわからなかったかな。でもなんとなく天皇がやってる仕事っていうのは、例えば、2011年の3月11日に、東北大震災わかるかな？そう、東北大震災が、起こって、で、そういう時に、天皇陛下が被災者、なんて言うんだ？被災者は英語でなんて言うんだ？evacuate した people ね。なんていうの、元気づけるためにっていうのと、あと、どういう状況か、ね、視察するために、そういう被災地に行って、現地の人と、交流して、頑張ってね、とか、大丈夫ですよっていうのを、したりとか、あと、よくあるのは、いろんな国の、大統領とかね、首相、あと、王家の人たちと、会議とかしたり、あとなんだろうね。よく言われるのが天皇は象徴っていう役割を持ってるっていうのが言われてて、象徴って言われるとやっぱりちょっと曖昧な感じだけど、その曖昧な感じは私の中でイメージはあった。
Yeah, so largely the emperor has mostly, I guess, you'd call public-facing duties to be a symbol of Japan and help out, or not help, visit different locations. But currently Japan has the emperor has no actual governance or powers and things like that. But one of the reasons we actually decided on this topic, it's one I've been thinking about for a while, I think the third time, and this time is actually time we're doing an episode, is because something we'll talk about in the middle section, we ended up running around the Meiji Palace, like the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. There's also one in Kyoto. And I was thinking about, wow, so I can't remember what the circumference of the palace is 5 kilometers, and you might be thinking, oh, that's not that big. But when you're considering this is in center of Tokyo, 5 kilometers is ridiculous, huge. And you have these massive trees and this giant wall. And I was thinking, wow, I never hear anybody talk about the emperor. But this seems like it'd be a lot of money to uphold and, just all this land being used in pretty, a very big business location in Tokyo just for the emperor. And we looked it up and it looks like just his house alone the emperor lives in is around $300 million. Or was it more than that? No, sorry. It was more than that for that? No, was that?
300億、あれいくらだっけ？300億とかだっけ？もっとするか？3兆？
Oh yeah, it was
違う。
Sunchol. Yeah, you're right. It was
そうだ
Sunchol.
ったっけ？
Does that mean 300 million? A lot of money.
でもそもそもあれ、なんかなんていうの？
Oh, sorry,
世界
sorry. $300 billion. There we go. $300 billion.
なんか、そもそもあれってさ、やっぱり、なんていうの？まあ、江戸城かな？そうそう。で、当然、一般の人には売ってない建物だし、まあ、なんて言えばいいんだかな。まあ、世界遺産みたいな感じ。まあ、遺産みたいな感じだから、一般の人は買えないわけよ。だからそもそも、その価値を何円って示すのは多分難しい。
Well, the estimate that was 300 billion, which I mean, apologize for that huge. There's a huge difference in that price difference. Yeah, 300 billion came from evaluating the land, just the land, not even talking about anything on the land. For how much? Yeah, for how much that would cost, given the standard rate of the area, and so that was what equated to $300 billion. What I would say is what you're saying, like the Shochou and the symbol of Japan. I had the question because I was fairly familiar with, like, you know, the emperors in World War II and some of the stuff that went on and some stuff early in Meiji Restoration, which we'll talk about in a second. But I mean, what are the origins of the emperor? Why does Japan have an emperor? You know, where did this come from?
なんだっけ、一番最初が、なんか神武だっけ？神武天皇みたいなので、なんか、その人は、そもそも実際に実在したかどうかも、なんか、怪しいみたいな人物で、で、その人、神様なんだよ。なんか、アマテラス大神？なんか、太陽の神様みたいな感じで、で、その人が、まあ、日本っていう国を、まあ、作った的な説があって、で、そっから、その天皇制度っていうのが、2000年ぐらい続いてんのかな？それがもう紀元前、200何年とかからあって、で、それがずっと続いてるから面白いよね。しかも、今の天皇陛下は、今、120何年だっけ？ 126 とかだよね。
It looks 126。
そう。126代目の天皇なのね。でも、1から25代目ぐらいまでは、なんかそもそもいたかどうかは怪しい的な感じで、でもすごいよね。どっからそれが分かったのかっていう。
Yeah, I want to pause right there so just people picked it up with Japanese. So the first emperor, basically, the whole reason he's the emperor, I mean, there's some other things. Maybe he also helped win some power in something I was reading about. But generally speaking, it's because he's supposed to have a connection with the sun god. And that's why he's the emperor, and that's why he deserves all his power. And you're like, okay, whatever. Let's say that, you know, it's the first legend, you know, that's fine. And that's how I thought as well. And I sort of had an idea if that was his story. The thing I did not know, which is what Amy pointed out, was 25. They had the lineage after the emperor. 25 people down after the emperor, you know, successions of his son, his son, his son, his son. We don't know whether him nor 25 people after him even existed. And for the emperor, and most of them, from what I can tell, there's no physical evidence of such. It's just like a tale. And that's what blew my mind, which I was like, wait a second, guys, this isn't even like Christianity, where it was like, hey, there's one dude who everybody had rumors about, and then some other people like, oh yeah, I remember that dude, and he writes some stuff about it. This is like if Jesus like knew, you know, Jesus had a son, you know, or not so cool, like Jesus, but 25 times removed. This is like, no. And then all those Jesuses are debatably existing or not. And that is the foundation of this emperor lineage. And so like that's, I think, so the 26th emperor is the first one where people actually know, wait, no guys, we actually have papers on this guy and he existed. And that continued unto, and when was that? From 500 AD? Like when this 26th dude was born? I think, where's his time frame? He is right here, and when he supposedly live? 530, where was it? There's question marks everywhere. Either 531 or 534 AD, it seems. And he's the first guy.
That's when he died.
Oh, that's when he died. Okay, so I don't know.
450 that's when he was born.
Yeah, but the other guys, all 25 behind him, we don't even know if they lived. So, I don't know what I thought about that. I mean, I know what I thought about that. I thought that was like kind of crazy. And I'm also was curious about, I asked you about whether you knew the emperor's name. do you feel that people actually feel or like even know about what we just talked about? And do you feel like they actually have some idea that the emperor is related to something important to Japan and its history? Because with such a loose foothold for something that's so powerful, like I said, $300 billion for a house, I thought you'd have a more solid foundation for a reason as to why this lineage of people is important.
なんかもともと天皇が、国を治めてたのね。昔から。でも、その戦争が終わって、で、天皇が国を治めるのはやめましょうってなって、で、そこから天皇が、一番最初にも言ったけど、象徴っていうイメージが、象徴っていう、まあ、仕事なのかなをするようになって、で、なんか今、面白いウェブサイトを見つけたんだけど、そのウェブサイトは、日本の若者にとって皇室とは、まあ、皇室ってなんていうの？ロイヤルファミリーかな？まあ、ロイヤルのシステム。そうそうそう。Yeah. で、とは何かっていうのを若者、30人に聞いたと。で、まあ、ここで言われてんのが、まあ、若い人たちは国民に寄り添うとか、遠い存在っていうのを、まあ、皇室のイメージとして持ってて、で、なんだろう、やっぱりこの女子大学生19歳が言ってるのは、まあね、自然災害とかね、起きた時に、天皇陛下がその場所を訪れると、まあやっぱりみんな、なんていうの、笑顔が戻ったりとか、まあ生きる希望が生まれるとかね、そういうありがたみを持ってね、接してる感じで、で、なんだろう、座ってる被災者と同じ目の高さで、一人一人にね、語りかける優しいおじいちゃん、おばあちゃんという印象を持っていますって書いてあるね。
Well, I do have a question for you, actually, which is, how much is the like, like, you know, this history, imperial history, taught in schools in Japan? Do you remember any time being taught about, you have the first bro, who's the sun god's, you know, connection, and then you have 120 dudes, and 25 of them, we don't even know if they existed.Any stories about this? Do you remember in like formal education?
ジムってのあんま覚えてないけど、なんかやっぱり日本の歴史、日本史っていうのはさ、まあ戦争がまあメインテーマじゃん。メインテーマっていうか、だいたい歴史の授業ってさ、何々年、何々の戦いが起こったとかをさ、まあ覚えるじゃん。
いや。
そう。とか、あと何々年にこういう法律ができましたとかね。で、そういう場面で天皇の名前が出てたりして、そこで、何々代の何々天皇が国を作ったんだとかは、まあ勉強するけど、あんまり1代目からずーっと126代までは覚えた記憶はないし、でもそれを全部覚えてる人もいた。なんていうの、ネードみたいな感じの人が、俺、1代目から126代目まで全員天皇言えるぜみたいな人がいて、まあそれはちょっとまあおかしな人で、普通の人は言えない。
I was just talking about the simple question, like, okay, once you've established that there's like, you know, that the 26th person existed, I can see how people would just be like, oh yeah, no, that guy had a son, and you know, the last guy was the emperor, but in my head, the first question is, wait, why was the first guy the emperor?And so that's what I found to be such an interesting question. But you want to read that?
なんか今ね、面白いのがあったのが、新天皇陛下の名前を答えられたのは2人だけって書いてあって、多分このウェブサイトがなんていうの、書かれたのは多分、天皇が最近というか、まあ、変わったのね。で、多分変わった時に書かれたのかはなんかわかんないけど、30人中、2人しか天皇の名前を言えなかったんだよ。しかも、今の、まあ、天皇陛下、なる人様って言うんだけど、徳って書いて、仁で、なる人って読むんだけど、実際これ、なるとはなんか読めない気がするね。まあ、そういうのもあるんじゃない？
Yeah, that's crazy. I'd read that as a tokuni. But I mean, I know Hito, all the most emperors, there are some times with the empresses in Japan's history, but most times their last name is just Hito. So I find it funny that all really they had to remember was the sound naru and then just put Hito at the end. But I would want to say something, which is like, it seems like you're saying that there doesn't seem to be, we'll talk about that, what you were talking about, was abolishing the imperial line and things like that. But I want to say there's another perspective that I want to introduce about like the emperor and the role in Japan, and it's about the Meiji Restoration. Because the role of the emperor before that, like there were periods of time where like the emperor had more or less power, but before the Meiji Restoration in like the 50s or 60s, I'm trying to remember the exact date, the emperor did not have like Japan didn't have like nationalized power coming down, like a centralized force, and it was a lot of like it was feudal Japan. So samurais doing their shit. It was kind of like might makes right with a bunch of different regional locations, and given that there was also, Japan was just closed off for a very long time. One of the U.S. always gets involved. Funny thing. One of the reasons that Japan, ended up getting this restoration in the first place was directly related to the United States, where they sent over a large ship, a dueling ship called something Perry. I can't remember his last name, but in Japanese, they only referred to Perry. Basically, it was like, hey, you guys open up for trade or else. And so Japan did, but this also made Japan realize, or some people in Japan realized, wow, the U.S. is really strong. We don't want to get imperialized like everybody else did. And this is what ended up happening, that multiple coalitions came together and had this idea that if we can bolster and a national identity through the emperor, it'll make us a lot stronger. And also we can take like the signs and stuff from other locations. So this whole thing led to a whole bunch of ups and downsides of directly something related to the emperor. For example, like something that I'm very critical of, but it is what it is one of the reasons that foreigners don't have to worry so much about learning different dialects in Japan is because the emperor, and under the Meiji Restoration, standardized Hyojunko. So everybody speaks Tokyo Japanese. If anybody's wondering where that comes from, it was like Tokyo samurais spoke a certain way in Japanese, and they're like, how about everybody does now? Another thing that I didn't know, I'm not sure if you knew this, is that the part of the Meiji Restoration is that public education was free and mandated across Japan. Is that something you knew? Mm. Yeah, but I didn't know that was from the Meiji Restoration as well. And that's also where samurais, they made it so it's a lot harder for samurais to wield their swords and a bunch of other things like that, as well as they burned and destroyed a lot of different castles and things like that. So there was a mixed bag, and a lot of the Western influence that Japan has nowadays and how people think of it as Japan is because of the Meiji Restoration. And so I was wondering if you knew that, or like if people, when the people think of the emperor, are they associating, like if they have any sort of feelings that they associate with him? Because in my head, it's like you can either talk about this big long lineage, or you could say, oh, the emperor is the reason that we all have the same language, the same standard dialect that we learn, or he's the reason we have public education. Do people know that? Do you feel like?
いや、まあでも近代史で勉強するのかな、その明治天皇、明治維新だっけ、そういうので多分やると思うよ。
And yeah, but you don't think that has to do anything with why do you feel like people, you said only people could remember the name, but at the same time, there were people seem to be happy when the emperor comes. I feel like a dissociation where at least like with Britain, when they talk with the queen or like the king now, there's some idea that it's, maybe they have the same sort of like they're not able to point as to why it's important. It's only important because it's said to be important, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. They have all this money come in. Because if you go there, like to either the, what are they called? The palaces, they're really cool. And and I went there, and that's we was actually a spot that we went there to run. And that wasn't because we're like a huge fan of the emperor. It's just because, it's kind of cool. And all the stuff, and there is history there. But I just wonder like where the line is and how people actually, if they, believe that's important or not. Do you have any, I think with your reading, because I do have some experience talking to people about whether they believe, whether the emperor should be abolished in Japan or not. 少々お待ちください。Or do you think you've ever had a conversation about that? Like abolishing the emperor in Japan with
いや、別にそういう、なんていうの、話をしないってことは別に、なんていうの、天皇制度をみんな、いいものと思ってないってわけじゃないから、で、まあ、アンケート渋谷センター街で10人にインタビューしたってすごい場所ですごい少人数に聞いてるね、これ。で、まあ、今言ったアンケートだと、天皇制を廃止すべきという意見はゼロだったそうだって。で、やっぱりなんていうの、賛成もあんまりないけど、でも、全く反対っていう人がゼロだから、なんていうの、天皇がいることで、まあ、なんていうの、平和とか安心が、まあ、 セキュアされてるから、もう結果論、変えなくていいんじゃないっていう人が多分多いと思うし、
Why do you think, you think that they think that he has something to do with the safety of Japan? Because the emperor is also the reason Japan got into World War II, right? So he obviously, there was like a unifying effect or forcing people to lose part of their culture and, mandate a language on them, which now maybe people think it's a good thing, but at the time people didn't. But I'm saying he also was the reason that Japan got into a bunch of wars and then ended up jumping into World War II. So I'm wondering, why would you assume that? Do you think just Japanese people associate him with peace? Like why is the imperial line associated with peace, do you think?
だから多分、廃止すべきっていう意見がゼロなのは、今の状態、もう、それじゃ、アメリカみたいにさ、ガン持ってたりとかしないじゃん、日本だと。だから、この今の状態を続けてられてるのは、天皇制があるってことだけじゃないけど、天皇制があるっていう状態で、それが、実現できてるってことは、結果論、いいんじゃないみたいな。天皇制があって、別にいいんじゃないっていう意見だと思うけど、別に、そうね、そう。
So you just think, well, why not? Well, we don't want to change anything that we could risk having any issues, basically. I do think I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, it seems I have as much a claim to being the emperor of Japan as the current emperor, given he has 25 sets of dissociations. It's like saying like, hey, I've met, well, like I haven't met Brad Pitt in person, but my son met Brad Pitt, and then they're like, can I see any of your documents on any of your sons? Oh, I don't have them, and they're like, you know what, you should be the leader of this country. And so to me, I don't know.
違う、今はだから天皇はさ、象徴だから別に政治には関わってないよ。
No, but my point is like he's a symbol. I get that. I'm saying that, but the symbol has no foundation is my point. So that's what I'm saying. But I guess it's kind of like the currency where you're saying just the fact that people believe there is some reason is enough for there to be a reason to continue it, basically.
なんだろう、なんか今思うけど、天皇制別にあって悪くないと思うんだよ。でもそうだね。
You are okay. Well, let's be clear here. The emperor, there's something to learn. He is the wealthiest political figure in the world, apparently. In terms of political, like what's it called? In an office, not like talking about somebody who has like Putin, who has a bunch of hypothetical, or real power, but assets like just by having dictatorship. Out of like actual public officials in a position, he's considered to be like the wealthiest one in the world. It doesn't just come from his salary. It comes from, like I said, he lives in his net worth is like 145 million, but then he lives in a place that's valued like 300 billion.
そこの部分でさ、なんていうの、国民の税金を使って、なんか、wealthy な生活をするのは、ちょっと、なんていうんだろうね。これ言うと多分、なんか叩かれそうだよな。なんか間違ってるっていうか、なんていうんだろうね。やっぱり
Well, it's not just this. That's the thing is his salaries. I think from what I see wasn't that high. It's like $1 million or
Not that high.
Well, his direct salary from taxes. But that's not all the expenditure that happens around the. You know what I'm saying? All the events. Oh, you pulled up his schedule before. I don't know if you still have it about like all the stuff they have, and that's not even talking about the upkeep of like $300 billion facility hypothetically, as well as any other thing that has to do with the emperor. Like, didn't you say that you had to have pictures of the emperor in like classrooms or something at one point, like way early on the podcast? I thought you remember saying that some classrooms have like pictures of the emperor. I know in maybe I'm thinking of it in Britain. There's a thing where you can request, or is this Canada, man? It was in Canada. Yeah, you can request a picture of the queen because they still have an interesting relationship with the queen. I was wondering is there anything like that for the emperor, like where you have to, in public schools, they have to have a picture displaying him or anything like that from you, what you can remember? So like, there's no situation where they're like, oh, this is a government thing. You need to have a picture of the emperor somewhere.
No.
That's interesting. So it's like the emperor's role is very, very low key, but there's also a whole bunch of money being spent at the same time.
なんか、ちょっと待ってね。なんか天皇制度は別に、あってもいい、あってもいいっちゃいいと、あってもいいと思うけど、でもなんて言うんだろう、天皇一家に生まれた、男の子は絶対にさ、天皇にならないといけないじゃん。なんか歌舞伎みたいな感じだけどさ、 なんていうの、その家系に生まれたら親と同じことをしないといけないっていうさ、まあ仕事みたいなのあるじゃん。でさ、もしさ、自分がさ、天皇の一族に生まれて、で、本当は天皇の仕事をやりたくないと。で、なんだろう、まあアーティストになりたいとかね。そういうことを思ってたとしても、天皇をやらないといけないから、なんかちょっとかわいそうだなとは思うし、ね。
Okay, well, how about here's how I see it. To me, it seems like people like all the things associated with like the history, maybe all the buildings and other things like that. Even though the emperor literally destroyed a lot of historical buildings in Japan, which is a whole thing that happened, like I said, under the Meiji Restoration. But if nobody even knows his name, what's it matter so much for there to be an emperor? Couldn't you just, like if they just forgot announcing, like they just stopped announcing, he dies and they just don't announce it and they don't say anything. Nobody, you might have like one guy in Japan be like, didn't we have an emperor like 20 years ago? And be like, oh yeah, we did. Like I wonder how much of a real problem. It's not the queen. People like went hard for the queen, even though that I feel like in that story, although the story makes more sense, it's like a guy like people were powerful, people took over, then you have a king, and then the king's son, etc., etc. But I just feel like the actual person doesn't really seem to matter if nobody knows their name. And to me, like the first thing, it's like with the religion, it's always about the first one's important. Yeah, no, but it's a mascot who nobody even remembers. It doesn't make any sense. Do they remember his face? Do they remember his face? You're saying they could see the emperor. The only thing I saw is iconic about the emperor. If you look at most of them, they have this awesome like samurai. Like top. No, I know they're different. They ruined the aesthetic. That's but they're all like there's a huge line of they have what is that called? This large like wiener looking like hot dog looking like
hot dog
like hair extension that looks like you put like a samurai sword on your head, and then it's like your hair tied up. Do you have any clue what that's called? Well, that's the only thing I found iconic, and the two most recent emperors don't have that. They just have like a standard cut, and they kind of ruined that. So
いやもう今のモダンになったでしょ。
It'd be so much cooler if they had the
次の天皇陛下はモヒカンとかになるじゃん。モヒカン。
Oh yeah, so it's kind of like a. I don't even know. It's an iconic hairstyle. Let me think. If there's anything. Oh yeah, another reason that I want to talk about this was I'm watching. There's a Rurouni Kenshin remake, and they talk a lot about the like Meiji Restoration because it's a samurai, it's the main dude, and then everywhere they go to is like, bro, you're not allowed to have a sword in place. And I was like, oh, yeah, and that made me interested about that. But I will say is that at least like the first person who I heard who was critical of the emperor was, I think I've mentioned this before, but one of my professors in the college I went to, where when it switched to Dewa, like the new emperor was appointed, I made a graphic, celebrating the change, not really related to the Imperial Japan, but I just thought it'd be funny to do so, to make an event out of it. Because I thought it was like ironic, I guess you could say, and I put it on the door of like two of my professors, and then after asking them, they're like, "Oh yeah, let's totally celebrate Reiwa." And I'm like, "You guys," and then I asked them like, "You guys like the emperor?" Like, well, it's just like I don't know, it's just like an event. And then my one professor, the only guy who's like really informed on the topic was like the one professor. He was into history and all this. He's like, no, I don't support the emperor. Don't support the emperor. But now that I'm looking more into things like with the Meiji Restoration, I find it ironic because I feel like that my professor, who's like born and raised in Tokyo, a lot of it is like the way I feel like he views other Japanese people and like the benefits he got come from the fact that there was the Meiji Restoration. Like when he talks to other people, I repeat a whole class. I mentioned this a lot of times where he's like, people are educated if they speak good standard dialect. And if somebody doesn't speak standard dialect, he always points it out and goes, oh, where are you from? Where in my head, maybe I'm meant to be hearing it, but I hear that critical thing. I'm like, bro, the only reason you're Japanese isn't the weird Japanese is because of a guy who at some point, hypothetically, 25 people dissociated was related to the sun god. But yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts about the emperor, or I don't know. I think you initially were critical of this as a topic, but I like learned a lot in the.
まあでもそうね、なんか日本ってさやっぱりまあ北海道は映像って言われてたし。まあ、アイヌの人たちね。で、まあ、沖縄は琉球王国か。とかね。まあ、本州と離れてる場所もあるし、で、方言も全然違うから、なんか日本人っていう、なんか概念がなかったらしいんだよ。あ、俺たち日本人だぜっていうのがなかったらしいんだよ。でも、天皇が、 ね、統一したことによって、俺たち一つの国に住んでるんだみたいな、そういう統一感が生まれたか
But at
ら、
the same,
まあ、
yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Oh no, I'm saying at the same time you forced them. I know Okinawans
まあ
I
ね。
talk to aren't.
でも、それがなかったら今の日本なかった可能性もあるんだよ。ねえ。それぞれ違う国になったかもしれないし。ね、まあ、who knows だけどさ。
Yeah, no, I'm just saying the Okinawas that I could say Okinawans because they self-identify as Okinawans, but they don't speak like it's a whole complicated thing. But I feel like there was a much better way. You know what I'm saying? It's like ends justify the means question. It's like, well, yeah, there was no reason for him, and he did forcibly kind of rob the culture of a bunch of regions and force them to speak their language and burn down a bunch of castles and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But now it's fine. And so I feel like that's like the American thing. Well, we nuked Japan twice, but Japan's doing. I mean, they're
The same
doing worse.
thing?
No. I'm saying it's like, but Japan's doing nice now. You know what I'm saying? That's like the argument there. And so, yeah, let us know. Have you guys even I'm wondering, was there anybody here who didn't know Japan had an emperor? Just because it's like I feel like it never comes up ever. Yeah,
It's a sim-
let us know. 戻りました。
We're back.
今週ハーフマラソン走りました。イェイ。いいことかどうだわからないけど。
The reason for that is because I'm going to do a half marathon.
本番。
On Sunday, which is this week. I mean the day the week we will release this podcast.
もともとそのハーフマラソンの走るつもりなかったけど、その最初のセクションに言ってた通り、明治の日本語なんして公共、見たくて、それで見に行った時に、全部やれるんじゃないと思って、で結局ハーフマラソン走った。
Yeah. When it comes to the word 公共, I like think of 公共マラソン or 公共ランナー. Runner. So yeah, I was like, why not? And then it's 5 kilometers for one lap.
Rap 一周。
Yeah. So one lap. So you have to run 4 laps and 1 kilometer. So yeah, it was pretty tiring. And at the last 5 kilometers, I was dying, and then my feet like were in pain, like in great pain. So.
私も前陸上やってたんだけど、その何でしたっけ、短距離だったので、その久々になんか3マイル以上走ってないから、私のふくらはぎは結構張ってたというの。やばかった。でもなんていうか疲れなかったけど、はいっていうか、なんかその体はほとんど大丈夫だったんだけど、ふくらはぎだけはめっちゃ張ってたので、今週できない、そのマラソンできないのは、なんかたくさんお金払わないといけないみたい。そので前に申し込まないといけない。この事前に、そう。でこのマラソンはどれぐらいかかったの ?6000 円ぐらい。で、それをなんか1ヶ月前にやらなくちゃいけなくて、でも私はそれができなかったから、参加できないけど、一応、ハーフマラソン走った。一応それが言える。
Actually, I have done like 15 or 16 kilometers, but never done 21 kilometers. So I was like, since I have done 15 to 16 kilometers, 21 is just a little bit of like extra 5 kilometers. So I thought I could do that. But actually, it was so hard. Like, yeah, I was about to lose to myself. But yeah, somehow, we made it. Yeah.
日本の抽選のシステムについて話した方がいいと思う。そのマラソンの、マラソンだけじゃないけど、何でしたっけ、マラソンの他に、ゲームの、ポケモンカードの話もあったんだけど、その、日本では、なんかたくさんの人が一つのことをやりたかった場合、アメリカの場合だと、その、なんていうか、買うサイトはただ値段を増やす。なんかわかる？なんかテイラー・スウィフトのコンサートがあったじゃん。 で、その問題なのは、なんか、たくさんの人が買いたかったから、そのチケットの値段はだんだん増えてきたというのがあった。でも日本ではそれは禁じられてるの。わかる？
Yeah, I don't think so.
でも禁じられてるのもある程度。なぜかというと、そのなんか PS5 の販売の場合だと抽選だった。このマラソンについて、その東京のマラソン教えてくれたこと。
Like I guess like I don't know if I'm right or not, but like I heard Tokyo Marathon, you have to buy the ticket to get a chance to win a lottery. Lottery じゃなくて、抽選でなんていうの？ Lottery, yeah. So like even if you pay the money, there's no how do you say like
Guarantee,
yeah, that you can run for Tokyo Marathon.
で、戻るの？もしできなかったら。
No. It's just buying ticket to
最
do the
低。
lottery.
で、どれぐらいかかるの？その東京の。
I don't know actually. I heard it was like pretty expensive. But since people really want to experience Tokyo Marathon like once in lifetime, so yeah, but people would
どうぞ。
yeah like to pay a lot of money for that.
まあ、なぜかというと、その東京のマラソンは走るための場所イベントじゃなくて、あゆみが言ってたのは、たくさんの人がただなんかコスプレしたくて、なんか走りながらコスプレしたいという、欲望というか。
Yeah. There are actual athletes who are aiming for Olympics, but at the same time, there are normal people who just want to experience, and they wear like costumes to run. Yeah, and it's really funny. Yeah.
でもその抽選の話に戻ると、そのPS5 は日本が作ったゲーム機。アメリカだともちろんなんかお金がたくさんあった場合、オンラインで、it's called scalpers というんだけど、すごくなんか俳句買って、いろいろなんか買って、それでもっと高い値段で売る人はscalpers という。でも日本では多分調べないといけないけど、多分禁じられてる。なんかいつもポケモンカードの話は、今の日本だと、そのポケモンブースターパックかな？買えない。抽選システムがある？それとも完全に買えないだけ？でもそのストアに、店に行くと、全部はなんかその大きな、ブースターパックじゃなくて、みんな多分この TCG、カードゲームの話よくわからない人がたくさんいるんだけど、つまり、ほとんどのカードゲームの場合だと、ちょっとガンブル的な、ところがある。そのなんか15枚のカードが、無作為的に、なんかできていて、で、わかる？多分この話を全然わからないけど、とりあえず全然そんなに大事じゃない。その東京マラソンの参加、やばい。
2万so like for Tokyo Marathon, apparently you have to pay 23,300 yen, and then it used to be 5,000 yen, about 5,000 yen like in 2007, but yeah, it became as twice as expensive.
それ、申し込むだけ？
Actually, I'm not sure. Like, yeah, if someone can get money back if they lose the lottery.
すごく、なんか、思ったより、アメリカの場合はどうなんだろうね。マラソンに参加したことがないから、短距離だから、なぜわざわざ、その痛みを感じるために。
I mean, like, isn't it amazing to run in such a beautiful city, Tokyo? Because, like, many foreigners come to Tokyo to see the scenery and then, like, to feel the city vibes. So, yeah.
でもめっちゃ、なんか全部は報道だから、痛くない？ショーコックスは今、このミドルセクションに聞いてると、マラソンに結構参加したことある人と思うんだけど、このことについてどう思いますか？もし東京に参加したことあると思う。
And also for Shockox, like I wonder how you train for ultramarathon because like I was literally dying, like just running 21 kilometers. So like my feet couldn't move. Yeah.
教えてください. And we're back with the final section. And if you made it to the final section, that means send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a comment, question, language related and or otherwise. And this week we have 2 comments, which I had to break up into smaller pieces. Apologies, I can't respond to everything. The first is from Shakox, and it reads, if Joey hates musicals and Japanese comedy, then I'd probably love Japanese comedy because I love musicals. I think that's how that works. I have a very important question. I don't think I've asked this before here, but if I have, disregard. Do you laugh when you're by yourself? There is a correct answer, and apparently mine is wrong. I don't laugh when I'm by myself. To me, laughing is purely a social thing. It's to show other people that I think something is funny, but by myself, I don't laugh. I just internalize I think something is funny. I had this one-on-one with my wife, and she said I'm weird. Then I took to Facebook, and the master called me wrong. I still fight for it, though. Also told it's probably just undiagnosed autism, but we'll leave that one to the pros.
全然アーティズムではないけどね。でもな、アーティズムってさ、アーティスティックピーポーはさ、ジョークがわからないとかよく言うじゃん。でも自分でいるときに笑わなくて、他の人といるときに笑えるんだったら、オーティスティックではないと思うよ。あとなんだ
Do you laugh at jokes by yourself? Like
About
out loud. When you see something funny and you're by yourself, do you laugh?
何か見てて自分だけしかいないはアプライする
If you're by yourself and you watch something that's funny, do you laugh out loud?
めちゃめちゃ笑うんだけど。なんか、The Office とかさ、私 The Office 好きなんだけど、見てて、アメリカンバージョンね。で、普通に笑うよ。なんか、ジムって結構いたずら好きじゃん。で、ドワイトに何がいたずらするときに、あーって笑うよ。
I definitely the same. I think from what I understand, the whole laughing does come from a social thing, and it makes me wonder if you had somebody who never experienced any sort of human socialization, if they still would laugh, because definitely it's in there as in the capability to laugh. But I wonder what you would laugh at. And maybe we talked about the 2 different types of like laughing earlier, but I would say that I have less pleasantry laughing, but like when I can't hold back the like when something's just really, really funny. I remember there's a show called Prison School, which I'm not recommending it necessarily. I'll say that I normally don't laugh as much at Japanese comedy, and for many people, they'll find it way too raunchy and be like, what did you just recommend me? But for some reason, Prison School, I find it extremely hilarious. And there was the OVA special episode of the show, and I remember just watching it by myself, and I would laugh so hard that I was concerned that I would pass out because I couldn't breathe. And no, it was ridiculous. I was laughing so hard and it wouldn't stop. And I was like, oh, this is...
なんかツボにはまるとさ、マジでさ、息できなくなる。息を飲む感じになるよね。
Yeah, so I would have had like the most pathetic death of all time, potential like considered suicide, where it's like, Joey just kept laughing and like almost like the Joker, and then I just fell death by comedy anime. Normally, so like if it's like that, there's no way I can stop it. But I definitely think if it's like, oh my, that's clever, then I'm just a chuckle. But I do the same. I mean, maybe I wouldn't chuckle if I was by myself, where I would chuckle with them somewhere else. So yeah. Also, there wasn't something that was something in Shakaku's full comment that I wasn't able to read, but he was an anti-joke that he recommended. And for people looking for anti-jokes, I recommend one, and it's called Pink Ping Pong Balls. So if you want a great killer joke, I recommend reading it, preferably slowly and to a friend. And yes. And then, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that comment. And then we have a comment from Oddity. Hey, for there to be a culture of satire with a good amount of quality of jokes, you have to have something to satirize. The best food for hardcore quality satire has always been hardship and conflict. That's why the best jokes are always the ones that toy with uncomfortable, controversial subjects. Holocaust jokes, war jokes, oppression regime jokes. We're at war right now, best means ever. Ha. Are there atom bomb jokes in Japan? Following some of the previous episodes, oh my gosh, you reminded me of something. Following some of the previous episodes about politics and apathy, it's been established that Japanese people don't care about much of the above. I'm obviously generalizing here, so it makes sense that most comedy would mostly focus on parody rather than satire. And another thing she says, another thing that came to mind regarding sarcasm in comedy is that it requires a healthy sense of self-deprecation. Considering the concept of honor in Japanese culture, could that contribute to the scarcity of sarcasm? And she left us with several jokes. I don't know if, podcast applications will let me read them, or they'll put some sort of warning tag on them, because some of them are pretty dark, but I can read two of them. So the first one was, what is the most permanent fixture of our socialist economy? Temporary shortages. And then another one was, what to do if a man you don't know takes a seat at your table in a pub and starts to sigh? Immediately demand to stop the anti-Soviet propaganda. So if you understood that, you understood that. If you did not, you did not. Oddity is currently in a war zone. So, yes. What I will say, so what I remember before you answer the question about whether there are atomic bomb jokes, I will say Americans are not very sensitive to what they consider the losers of World War II. And whether it be me to a German friend we have, or but I remember a story about one of my Japanese friends who went to high school in the U.S. where he told a story of he was just walking the hallway and he ended up becoming friends with these people. But this is what kids are like, where they walked around. They had two guys coming in because there were two bombs, and one goes, "Woo!" and the other one does the same thing, just walk up to him and and there was no other context. And he said that happened on a regular basis, and that was almost like an introduction with one of his friends. So that's what children do.
タブーだろ。そもそもさ、なんかさ、今年の夏にさ、バービーとさ、オッペンハイマーがさ、at the same time にさ、違うわ。ローンチされたじゃん。それでさ、なんだっけ、誰がさ、その画像を作ったかわかんないけどさ、なんだっけ、バービーハイマーだっけ？
バーベンハイマー、
バーベンハイマーか。がさ、の画像が出回ったじゃん。それが理由でかはわかんないけど、日本でオッペンハイマーが見れないんだよ。そうそう。だから。
Wait, it didn't show? Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't realize that. And what about Barbie?
バービーは見れる。
I'm assuming was the explicit reason, was it just because it was covering the World War II? I haven't seen Oppenheimer, but that was something I was wondering. And we talked about before with World War II, where I really think that, I mean, obviously I think there's truth in most issues, but when you get a full sense of perspective on from both sides of the issue, and let's keep in mind here, we just talked about earlier, one of the reasons Japan kind of led to this whole unification imperialism thing was because of the US imperializing other locations. So I'm not saying that makes Japan blameless for the whole thing, but I always feel like every time I've learned about this from the US perspective, it is overly simplistic about the state of the situation. But with that said, at the same time, I always feel like a distinction that's not made especially from the Japanese perspective, is assuming for the keep in mind how quick of a shift there was in Japan, but went from feudal to non-feudal and imperial, and the fact that all of these different locations, the whole country, were not Tokyo, but they're all forced to abide by it. And so I'm not saying obviously the soldiers and who was doing what or why they did it, but I just remember the speech from the person I said, which is that when they saw, I think I mentioned before, when they saw that the America sent notes over after they bombed, announcing the war ended, they were crying tears of joy because of the fact that it was over, and they realized they had no chance of winning because of the high quality paper the U.S. was able to dispense. And so I wonder, I mean, I probably should see open up, but it's 3 hours, dude. I can't even. It's a complete side note, but I don't know. I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm a man who works at 20-minute episodes at a time once a week. And if you air it doesn't matter how good of a show you air. If I'm watching it, up to season 6, shout out to you, JoJo's or Haikyuu, and you throw it to Netflix and you release the whole thing at once, I'm not watching it anymore. I operate at 20 minutes once a week. That's all I get from me. 3 hours at once a time, can't do it. I don't know about you. Maybe we're in a separate conversation.
I'm a binge watcher.
You're a binge watcher. I literally can't.
If the show is interesting to me.
The only time I'll watch it, like I said, once longer than that is if I'm at a movie theater, which in the US is like, bro, it's too much effort to go like all the way over there. And I'm not watching at my house. Don't be clear. I love the movie theater. It's just like, if I could teleport there and it wasn't like $5 billion and then like $27 for popcorn, I'd go more often. I would more go often here while I'm in Japan, but surprisingly, out of all the things we're close to, we're not actually that close to a movie theater. So I'm constantly completely off topic here. Okay, back to the question: are there atomic bombs jokes? Oh, the World War II joke. World War II jokes. What about any sort of political jokes?
Nope. We just hit someone and then laugh and then dance like an idiot and then we laugh.
I mean, the U.S. has.
We are a single cell creatures.
Whereas I think I talked about where the U.S. has the World War II back-to-back champs, but that's not even really a joke, other than the fact that like people like actually have shirts, and I've seen people wear World War II back-to-back champs shirts just as well. So I do think. I mean, what do you think about her saying that one of the reasons there might not be as much sarcasm in terms of the critical version of sarcasm or satire is because of like honor in Japanese culture and respecting like other like self-deprecation.
それもあるんじゃないし、そもそもコメディのさタイプが違うじゃん。からそのジョークも違ってくるしさ。ね。Well, B って感じじゃない日本って。
I wonder if you know what, this is where if we had any Chinese listeners, this would be very helpful because it's Asian country and it has gone through. I mean, depending on what region you come from, I feel like maybe there's like at least more poverty in places in China. But I would maybe India would also be something interesting here because they also have a lot of just. I wonder what kind of jokes are popping over there. Because yeah, like let me see. Have I ever laughed at? Like, you guys know I'm a big anime fan, but rarely do I actually like die laughing in anime. And then outside of that, I don't think I've ever even like I just cringe. That's basically what I do most of the time I see Japanese comedy. You know what? But while I'm here, you guys have to hold me accountable to this. I want to go and I'm going to see a manzai performance sometime in Japan.
There's like 500円漫才ショーとか結構あるから。
I gotta pay. I want to pay more than that. I want a good month. I want to know. You know what I'm saying? What's their Louis C.K. or Bill Burr, Dave Chappelle, whatever. I want to know who that is. And if I can chuckle, if I even do it, then I'll count that as a success. Yeah. Thanks for the comments. That bell means we've reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us in another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com and we might respond in the next episode. Also, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey.
And Ayami.
Signing off. Jane.